would like to, also welcome everyone, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Elena Venegas. She is a faculty member in the Department of Bilingual and Literacy Studies, and she's also the faculty fellow for educational technology in the Office of Faculty Success and Diversity. And as Claudia mentioned, this is her third session on assessment, particularly as it relates to technology tools and best practices that we can engage in our teaching, and especially as we move into our summer courses. So we're very appreciative of her willingness to facilitate these conversations with us, and I look forward to it. Thank you. Welcome, Elena.
Thank you both. Okay, so let me present my outline. First of all, this is an outline of the session. As Claudia had mentioned, this is the third of a three-part series. So if I see some familiar faces who have attended the previous two sessions, or one or both, this session is going to be a little bit different in that I'm going to feature one technology tool. I know last session I received some feedback that that portion of the sessions has gone by kind of quickly, and so that way we're able to spend a little bit more time there. But also to explain a discussion strategy that can be adapted for synchronous online meetings. And so that strategy is the pinwheel discussion. And as Claudia mentioned, I'll pause at various parts of the session to answer any questions that you may have. I'm going to minimize the chat feature just because it's a little bit distracting to me, but I know Claudia can help me to monitor it when it comes to times for questions. So first of all, in the first two sessions, the first one was on formative assessment and the second was on summative assessment. I outlined best practices for formative assessment in general and summative assessment respectively, and used an analogy of a soup to make the distinction between those two approaches to assessment. If you missed those two sessions or you just want a refresher, Colt has created a soft chalk lesson on assessing the online learner, which in itself is a formative assessment. So if you would like a refresher again, I encourage you to visit their soft chalk lesson, and the link is in the slide, and the slides will be shared with you after the session. So I do want to review one best practice that was mentioned in the previous two sessions, and this is to incorporate a variety of assessment strategies into your courses, whether they're face-to-face, perhaps in the fall, online, fully online, or hybrid. And so what I have done is to list an assessment strategy and then also tools that either are Blackboard or learning management system, or that can be readily and easily integrated into Blackboard. So I call these Blackboard supported tools, and then also tools that are external to Blackboard. So the first kind of assessment strategy that comes easily to mind is to have tests or quizzes. And so I've mentioned in the previous two sessions that I do use the Blackboard test. I use this to assign chapter quizzes for my undergraduate students. I use this as a formative assessment measure, not a summative assessment measure. In Panopto, I also use Panopto to record micro lectures. Panopto does offer a quiz feature. However, I do not use that personally, but I welcome you. It's a great way to see and have your students assess, and for you to see how they're progressing through the video. So I believe it has a feature where you can, to make sure that they're paying attention to the video, where they have to answer a question before they can proceed to finish and complete the video. Soft Chalk is also a great way to incorporate assessment tests or quizzes into your course. Top Hat, which was featured in the second session on summative assessment. Respondus 4.0 can be used to generate paper-based tests or online tests there. There are also other tools, Socrative, Informative I featured in the first session, Microsoft Forms, and then Kahoot was actually presented on by Professor Nicole Nicholson and Dr. Catherine Christopherson. and there is a link to a video for their CTE session that they presented in March. So today I'll be, as I previously mentioned, featuring discussions. So one thing is, of course, the discussion board feature on Blackboard. Today I'll also review how you can use Blackboard Collaborate Ultra for synchronous discussions. Top Hat can also be used Zoom, and I'll feature that this session as well. Formative and Nearpod. Nearpod is the tool I'll be showcasing this session, and then also Professor Nicholson and Dr. Christopherson also presented on Flipgrid, but then Professor Omar Elizondo also did one whole session on Flipgrid. And so there is a link to his recorded session that's available in this table. Something else is that you would like to offer opportunities for your students to engage in self-assessment. So they could do this in several ways on Blackboard. You could have them write a reflective journal, perhaps a blog. Socrative in Microsoft Forms, Kahoot in Nearpod can also be used as self-assessments if you are just having them used for formative assessments and you're not really counting it as a grade, or perhaps it's a completion grade for your students, but you mainly just want them to engage with and review the content. For peer evaluations, I've mentioned previously that I use Flipgrid. So my graduate students, they have presentations that they give, and they review at least one peer's presentation, and they leave feedback for their peer via Flipgrid. And as I mentioned previously, there is a video that outlines, and it's a whole session dedicated to Flipgrid. But I find that students like that. I know in previous sessions we've had concerns about like student privacy. So with Flipgrid, it is a video where they do record themselves. You could offer students the option to not show themselves on camera, so they could just pick up the audio. They could even do something as simple as like pasting a tape or post-it note over their camera on their cell phone or whatever device that they're using. Or if they're using a computer, then they could, like I have a little sliding thing here where I can turn my video on and off just manually. So they could use that as well if you have students that are concerned with their privacy, or you are concerned with their privacy. Finally, projects, individual or group. Blackboard wikis is not really how you might have them deliver their project, but it is a tool that can facilitate group projects. So it enables you as the instructor to see which students have contributed to the wiki and what percentage that they've contributed. So I attended a session in the fall that Colt offered, and I thought that this is a great suggestion, but they suggested that you assign each student, or have each student within that small group choose a particular color. And so that way when you look at, for their font, and so that way when you look at the wiki, you can easily tell how much or what percentage of which a particular student contributed, and what content that they contributed, besides looking into Blackboard in that feature. So for portfolios, TK20, we use this tool in the College of Education. One example is our graduate students in my Department of Bilingual and Literacy Studies. They build their comprehensive portfolios through TK20. Presentation. So I mentioned previously that I record micro lectures using Panopto, and I have found that some of my students, since I have used that tool, they begin to use the technology tools that I use in my courses. So in presenting some of their own presentations, some of my students have also created Panopto videos, and they have access to that through UTRGV, and they can readily submit it through Blackboard as well. In a previous session, I believe in March, all these sessions are kind of running together. I'm pretty sure it was in March, but I presented on Genially. And so this is somewhat of a difficult tool to use, but it's really neat. And so students can create a like interactive presentation. They can create infographics, a gamified kind of experience, dossiers as well through Genially. And then a number of tools can be used for writing assignments, primarily for formative assessment practices. So you can use OneNote Class Notebook. Socrative, Formative, Microsoft Forms, and Top Hat. So before diving into the tool, I do want to check the chat and see, or ask also, are there any questions thus far? Let me see. Okay. Where are the, oh, okay. So I see Sandra asked, where are the resources? These, there are links in the PowerPoint, which will be shared with you after the session. And so if you just click it, it'll take you to a video on the CTE's teaching continuity site. And also a link to that is included at the end of the presentation as well. Okay, so I'll move on. I'm going to minimize the chat. So first, I'm going to briefly overview Nearpod and then really kind of get into Nearpod and show you how to use it. So you can use Nearpod in a variety of instructional contexts, including face-to-face, hybrid, and online. You can create an account or use your Office 365, which is your UTRGV account, a Google account, or create a Nearpod specific account. So there are varying levels of pricing. I have mentioned in my previous sessions that I like to use the free version of these accounts, but it goes all the way up to a platinum account, which can be pretty pricey. And I'll show you the price there as well. So Nearpod can be accessed through your desktop, laptop, or mobile device. There's also an app, which is especially beneficial if you're going to have a live session with your students. So if this would be in a face-to-face class or in a synchronous online class meeting. I put, instead of questions or types, I put here activities. So there are different kind of activities that you can integrate, and these would be the alternative sources or alternative means of assessment. There are different features as well that I'll showcase a few of those too, like a 3D effect simulation for math and science. You can do a field trip, virtual reality, and then integrate Microsoft Sway, which is a presentation kind of like format. There are different resources. So Nearpod has webinars that are either live or recorded, and then they have YouTube videos that you can use. So I'm going to show you the Nearpod pricing. So again, I have the free version here, but they do have different options. So you could get a gold account for $120 a year, platinum account. This would be ideal if we had the higher education account, and then it could be readily integrated into Blackboard. But again, I am using the free account. So you can see here when you, let me see. When you go to sign up, you can use your Google account. I believe most of us already have a Google account. I know that each of us have an Office 365 account because, again, that's our UTRGV account. You can also see where students, they don't have to create an account. Whenever you have or launch your lesson, whether it's a live lesson or a student-paced one, they will enter code, and that's how they will access your information or your lesson. So let me go back to sharing my screen. Okay, so I am into Nearpod now, and so I want to show you some of the features that you can do. So whenever you add a slide, these are activities, and again, I have listed the activities on the PowerPoint. So the first activity that I included was a collaborate, and this is something that's more of like a short, very short answer response. So my question here that I posed was, what technology tools have you utilized during this time of remote teaching? And so this would be something like similar to an entrance ticket that you would use. It might be a question that you pose to your students, and you want for them to, you want to determine, did they do the assigned reading? Did they do the assigned homework? Or you want to determine how well are they mastering the content thus far? And so they can respond in that way. You also have the option to add images, and you can do a Google search here. So I can add a happy face there if I want to, or something probably more relevant to your topic. They do have different styles. These are pretty neat, but also for accessibility reasons, I think it's best to use one of these first two styles because the font is a little bit more, more readable. So you do also have the option, let me edit this again. You also have the option to choose, it'll show, I'm sorry, whenever I go to present the lesson, you have the option to choose to approve student comments before they appear on the Collaborate board. So that way, if you're worried if a student might share something inappropriate, then you can monitor that or choose not to have that comment added to the Collaborate board. One thing that I want to show you too is you can see here size. So with the free account, you are limited to a certain amount of size with your presentations. And so I'm just being mindful of that. Again, if you signed up for one of the other accounts of silver or gold or platinum accounts, then you would have more storage. So this is Time to Climb, and it's similar to Kahoot if you're familiar with that. I know in some previous sessions, some attendees have mentioned that they use that during their Zoom synchronous online meetings. It's similar to Kahoot in that points are awarded to students for answering the faster that they answer, the more points that they get, and also they receive points obviously for correct answers. So it's somewhat of like a competitive game. I should mention that Nearpod is more designed for K-12, although if you saw on the previous slide where it said pricing, there is a higher education feature and it has things that are a little bit more adult, not adult, but oh gosh, more adult in terms of like, for example, these Time to Climb characters, some of them are like teddy bears. And so I imagine that wouldn't be in the college or higher education version. So for question number 1 here, you have the option to again add an image, which I did. So I'm giving my students a hint here on how to solve this equation. So you have a choice to input math, and there are different mathematical terms or symbols that you can insert, like exponents and roots, different operators, Greek letters, etc. There. You can also choose whether students, they have the option of doing a text, selecting text as their correct answer, or an image. And so for question 2, for example, I added here an image. So they would have to choose which image shows the periodic table of elements. I know I went from math to chemistry. You here with the images, you can choose to add an image from your computer, from a cloud such as Google Drive, Dropbox, or OneDrive, which we use here at UTRGV. And then again, you could do a Google search. So that's what I did earlier. A Google search, and I just chose one of these images. And then question number 3 is just a typical type of quiz question that you can do. So with Time to Climb, you also can set a timer for how the limit, how much time students have to answer that, that question. And then you can, again, add different images for them to reference, such as here when I provided a hint on how to solve that question. Another option that you can use is an open-ended question. So this is a repeat kind of a question that I posed on the Microsoft forums, which is last week, but here you can add a video. And so I'll delete it so that you can see. So you can add an image, again, video, a PDF, audio, web content, or you can record something on your own. So perhaps you want to record a brief snippet of a lecture, and then you want to assess whether they understood that content. I'm going to use a video, and so let's see. So you can see here that you can search for videos on YouTube. So the one that I chose was the Freedom Schools. And so this is from a PBS documentary. And so I inserted that as well. You have the option to add, again, a timer if you want to. Here, best practice is to put how long the video is so that students are aware. I also included instructions such as they can respond either through text, or you can see here that they have the option to respond verbally and submit an audio recording. And then again, I put a citation for the source or the video that I am using. Okay. Other types of questions that you can do matching. So this is matching pairs. So again, I kind of mixed my science and math here, but you can see here, these are the pairs correctly ordered. You have the choice again to have either text or images. You can also incorporate math as well. Another option is to have your students draw their response. And so here the instructions say draw a right triangle that demonstrates these trigonometric ratios, sine, cosine, and tangent. And so again, you could add a timer. You can add media for your instructions, an image, video, audio, etc. You can have your students draw. Here you'll see they will draw on an empty canvas if you don't have a background image. And then I'll also launch this Nearpod so you can kind of see it from the student's perspective. You can launch a poll similar to like Poll Everywhere or Mentimeter. Here I just have, what types of technology tools do you plan to utilize in your future courses? So this would be if I were to launch this and have you all respond to it. For fill in the blanks, this one is interesting in how it's set up. And so when you are going to do the fill in the blank, you type in your sentence first, and then you select the words that you want to appear in your word bank over here. So at first I just had the United States and Britain, but I'm sorry, I had Great Britain and the US, but that would give away, of course, what the answer was. And then also I tried to select the United States as one, but you couldn't, you have to do it as two different blanks. So then I added in Great Britain here so that it wasn't as noticeable. So students have the option to fill in the blanks there. I did not show you these two options, but when you come to add activity, you also have the option to add Flipgrid. I tried to incorporate Flipgrid for my classes into this presentation, but for some reason it wasn't working. I'm not sure, I wasn't able to find information if that comes with the premium, not a premium, but the gold or platinum account. But again, there is a whole video session that was presented on how to use Flipgrid. And you can also do a memory test. And this is something I think more for like, I personally would maybe use for younger students, like elementary students. But I suppose if you were teaching like an anatomy and physiology test and you just wanted them to really, or a course and you really wanted them to familiarize themselves with this, with the images, then you could use that as well as a memory test. So there are different, when you come to add slides and add content, there are some pretty neat features that can be added. And so I do want to show some of those features. So I mentioned the PhET simulation. So these are interactive simulations here that are geared towards math and science courses. And they also have them organized by like, these are appropriate for elementary, high school, etc. And so by adding protons here, then it informs me of what elements that I'm building based on the different number of different protons, neutrons, electrons that I'm adding there. So there are different ones that you can choose and select from. You can also do a field trip. So for example, here I have this is a virtual field trip if I was teaching an art course and I want my students to look at Rousseau's painting that the Pentecost that's at the Louvre, then they can do that and look at it more closely. So this is actually a simulated virtual reality experience unless your students have a mobile device and a VR headset, then they can use that. Or if they have a web VR capable browser. But I think that's pretty neat, especially during this time, which as Elisa had mentioned earlier, we're all kind of stuck at home, but you can do a virtual reality trip there as well. So there's also the option to show BBC video. So here I showed, I chose this one on Athens and democracy. So perhaps I'm teaching a political science course, and so I want for my students to watch this video, and then perhaps afterwards I could add an open-ended question here, and I'm going to try to slide it here. So, and then we'll just pretend that my open-ended question relates to this video. So that's another option as well. Nearpod also offers 3D. So here, I believe that this is a protein structure, and so you can have the students kind of look more closely into that. But those are some of the features that Nearpod offers. So I will show you in a second how to launch these, but I want to also, I see the chat has several notifications, so I want to look at the chat as well. Before I do that, you can also have the option to add web content and add content in general. So you can make a slide or add slides as well. You can integrate, if you use Microsoft Sway, video, audio, PDF files also. As I mentioned previously, by you using tools such as Nearpod, you can inspire your students to use these tools as well. So I teach pre-service teachers, and my students often have to present mini lessons. And so this would be something that I could encourage them to use. And so it makes their presentations more interactive, and they can build in their own kind of ways to formatively assess their peers and whether they were paying attention to their presentation or not. So let me real quick look at the chat. And I'm having a hard time pulling it up right now. Okay, let me see. I'm looking at, okay, field trip. Yes, the field trip does sound very interesting. So I chose the Louvre. There was one that I was tempted to put in, which was the Santorini Islands in Greece, and I just wanted to put that in and pretend that that's where I am right now, but I didn't see a educational purpose for adding that. Yes, I thank you, Deborah, for a little smile. Yes, the field trips and the simulations would be cool as well. Denise, I see where you said, can you make your own VR experience in 3D? I'm not sure. That's an excellent question. I'm not sure, but I can try to find the answer for you, Denise. Also, Nearpod does not require students to sign up, so that's what I'll show you. And also, Sandra, I think I'll answer your question too in this next part, where I show you how to actually do the lesson. So Nearpod does not require, again, students to access it. They will simply put in a code, and they can access your lesson in that way. So let me return back to Nearpod here. Okay, so there are two ways that you can do, oh, also, sorry, Nearpod allows you to preview. So no, I just saw, Mario, your question. It does not link to the Blackboard gradebook. It's a tool external to Blackboard. So you can preview what students would see here. And so that's a helpful feature before you actually launch this. So I'm going to save and exit. So there are two different ways that you can launch this. So one way is through a live session, and this would be what you would use in a live lesson, what you would use in a face-to-face context. That's what I mentioned earlier, where it would be helpful for your students to download the Nearpod mobile app, because then they could use their cell phones or a tablet or their web browser on their laptop to access the lesson live. You could also use it for synchronous online sessions as well. Student Pace is not a feature that is typically included with the free account, which is what I have. It is typically included with the gold account, which costs $120 per year. However, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, Nearpod is offering the student-paced version free through June 30th. So if you wanted to do that, and this would be perfect for asynchronous asynchronous sessions, excuse me. So if I press here to launch a live lesson, then you can see that my students will insert this code whenever they go to join.nearpod.com or in the app. And so they'll input this code, and then they'll be able to join this lesson. So you can see here for my Collaborate board, as I mentioned previously, I have the option to choose to approve the student comments before they're posted. So yes, I want to do that, and I recommend you doing that as well, just in case you have students that might use language that may be a little bit inappropriate or offensive. You also have again, for privacy concerns, you also have the option to hide student names or to show student names as well. So I know that's been an issue or a concern of some faculty. So you can see here that for Time to Climb, again, I mentioned that this version, since it's a free version and not the higher ed version, it's a little bit more youth friendly, I should say. So I'm going to choose like a Himalaya. And then if you were to join my account, you would have or join my session, you would have the option of selecting an adorable little animal, and you would answer the questions and be able to try to pace up the mountain. But I think too, students they love Kahoot, right? Even though maybe it's not as juvenile as this Time to Climb. So I think they would still enjoy it. With the live lesson, I should say that even if students are accessing the lesson on their device, they cannot move forward until you click to progress forward. So the live lesson is a teacher-paced lesson. So you can see here again where the students will try to match the different pairs. Here they have the whiteboard where they can draw. And you're not seeing this because I am showing you as the instructor, but if you were to have joined the live lesson, then you can do that as well. Oh, sorry. Here you could see the interactive simulation. Again, these are geared towards math and science. And then, this option, for a slide that contains video, you have the option to either allow it to be played on all devices or on only your device. So this device only, I would recommend for a face-to-face class session, because you can show the video on the projector and the students can watch it collectively. For a synchronous online session, such as through Zoom or Blackboard Collaborate, I would recommend all devices. But from what a colleague has told me, what you would want to do is to, instead of playing it through your Zoom session, allot a certain amount of time. So if your video takes, I believe the example is 4 minutes and 42 seconds, you might allow them 6 minutes just in case they have any technical difficulties for some reason. So you can allow them 6 minutes and say, okay, I'm gonna set my timer for 6 minutes. Watch the video on your own device and then return to the Zoom session afterwards, and we'll continue. So that is what I would recommend for a synchronous online session. Again, here you can, you can see the virtual reality experience again here. And this is especially helpful anyways, because most museums are closed still, I believe, during this time. And so you can progress, and then there's a cute little kind of like, hey buddy, that else says you did it there. So let me see, I think I will end this. Okay, so you can also access reports, which is helpful. So you can receive a report via your email, but also you can receive and access a report here through here. So you can see where I have multiple sessions, and I was just testing this out. Sorry, I just got an email notification from Nearpod with the report. So you can see here that there are multiple times that I tested this on my own, and so if you have like multiple sections of the same course, then you can edit these and put, this was my section 1, this is section 2, etc. And so you can review the students' answers to the different questions or the different activities that were placed in. So of course, for an open-ended question, you would want to really read what they responded, how they responded, and you could assign points if you want to assign points, etc. You can see here where this student, she drew the right triangle, but she did not add sine, cosine, tangent, etc. So you would assign points accordingly if that was your purpose there. For the matching, you can see how many times they, how many attempts that they made. For the time to climb here, you can just see the class board. There was just one student, so obviously that student was the winner, but there are different options there. So you can download these reports as a PDF. If you choose to, you can also share them. So again, if you want to send this or email it to yourself, if you didn't access that option earlier, then you have the chance to do that as well. So again, there is a student-paced version, and so this would be appropriate for asynchronous courses. You can see here that there is a code, again, that the students would input, and so they would be able to complete this on their own. So I can show you how to embed this into Blackboard. So when you press embed, there is some HTML code here. The large version, I believe, is best, and so you will copy that there. So when you go to Blackboard, you'll go to build content and then item, and then you'll just put, see here I put Nearpod student paced assessment. There's a button here for HTML. When you press that, you just paste this in. Oh no, I didn't do it. Okay. There we go. I pasted it in, and then you see that there's a large box, and that will be the Nearpod. I mentioned this in previous sessions, but I'm going to hide this from my graduate students because every time I post something, they're always like, what is this? What do I need to do, etc. And so, well, you can see here that I did this last night, and so it was a different code, but the students, you would have to put in there the code that they would need to access the student-paced lesson there. Right now you're seeing my screen here. So going back to Nearpod, you also have the option to link this, so you can add the link via Blackboard. Somebody I saw asked on the chat earlier, this will not automatically input into the Blackboard gradebook. However, they do have the higher ed account option here. Oh, sorry, you're not seeing it. They do have the higher ed account option. If UTRGV were to purchase that, that would be awesome. You also have the option to email your students a link and the code for them to join also. So real quick, and then I'll take questions. There are different options. So if you, again, are doing a synchronous online session or a face-to-face class, you can launch a quick discussion with Collaborate, a gamified review quiz, or like an entrance ticket there. Okay, I hear somebody, but I'm not sure if you have a question. Let me also try to pull up. Are there any questions so far? Okay, let me check.
Set up an appointment with the branch that is on 10.
Okay.
Dr. Zamrani,
yeah.
you have your hand raised. Would you like to?
I even went to visit with him, and then he said, we'll get back with you on 3 business days. He never did.
Okay, so she had her hand raised. That's probably why she unmuted her mic. We'll wait for a later occasion. Anybody else have questions from the group?
I see Okay, I see Cynthia, you said you'd like to have sessions on things you have access to through Office 365. Those were in previous sessions, and the recording should be made available soon. Okay, and then also Sandra, if you create a self-paced session, will it be available when after June 30th? I am not sure, to be honest. That's something that I can look into and get back with you about. Yes. Okay. Then.
Elena.
Yes.
I have a question. This really intrigues me, this Nearpod. There's so much in there. Is it a standalone platform? Like, you know, you go into Zoom and that it's just Zoom and you do what you do like we're doing right now, but you have integrated Nearpod activities into Zoom. Is that how this would have to be used, or could you have just a Nearpod account and that would take care of your collaborative synchronous sessions that you have, plus all the activities?
So do you mean like if you can present, you can, okay, if I'm understanding your question correctly, so instead of meeting maybe via Zoom, are you asking if you can meet with your students through Nearpod?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm asking. Yeah, would it be like meeting through Zoom, but you have all these built-in things that you have, which are amazing?
Somewhat. So if you're going to do the live lesson, then that would be for a synchronous online session. You wouldn't be able to see your students like you would through Zoom or Blackboard Collaborate, but you could certainly see how they're progressing through the lesson. So yes and no, if that makes sense. If you want to be able to see them or like for them to ask you questions, like, you know, like they're doing now, I do not believe they would be able to do that through Nearpod.
Okay, so your best option is to have a Zoom account and have a Nearpod account and do it the way you are doing it, because they can do stuff through Nearpod and you can see their faces and what have you, and you can still get results from what they're doing on Nearpod.
Yes, so if you were to have a Zoom session, what you could do is to launch the live lesson, and then you could either have your screen shared, or you may not want to since you would see the instructor version, but you can kind of be, I guess, present while they're progressing through the live lesson.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna have to think about that. Thank you so much.
Okay, you might like, okay, so I'm gonna, I don't believe I saw any other questions on the chat related to Nearpod that I hadn't already either addressed or said that I would try to address. But I do want to turn to a discussion strategy that you can use in your synchronous online class sessions. So this is called the pinwheel discussion. So first, it's a strategy to integrate discussion into your courses. And this obviously could be used in a face-to-face context, but I will tell you today how you can use it in a synchronous online class session meeting. So what happens in the pinwheel discussion, if you were in the face-to-face context, and if you had student desks, you would arrange them into or divide your class ideally into 4 different small groups. I understand that some people teach classes that are much larger. So what you could do is to have several small groups, if that makes sense, like several pinwheels going on at the same time in a face-to-face class session. So it's a versatile strategy. It can be used in any discipline in which there is an ethical issue or controversial issue to discuss, or where students can adopt a certain perspective, whether that's a certain role or a certain character. And so discussion is a great method of alternative assessment because, first of all, students have to prepare for discussion. So if you have an assigned text or set of text that they need to read, then this is a great way for you to determine whether students have actually read those texts. At the same time, perhaps they need to do research on their own. And so this is a great way for them, again, so you can determine if they did those activities that you wanted to to have them engaged in. Giving an example from a literature-based course, you could assign students a specific role. So for example, those here where it says perspective number 1, where it says perspective number 1, perhaps the students are discussing the novel The Handmaid's Tale, and so these students will adopt the role or the character's perspective of Offred. You could assign them the role or character of Serena Joy, and they will discuss from her perspective. And then for perspective number 3, those students assigned to that perspective could discuss or answer the questions from the role or character of Aunt Lydia. And then the 4th group these are groups of provocateurs, but you could change the name if you wanted to. These are the students that essentially pose the questions to ask to the others. So what's great about this is that your students have to, you could require them to refer back to the text in order to support their assertions. So they have to do close reading and use evidence from the text to support their responses. Students could also be assigned a specific stance. So in an earth sciences class, for example, students that are assigned perspective number 1 or stance number 1, they have the stance that climate change is a natural and normal process. Perspective number 2 has the stance that climate change is unnatural and caused by human activity. And then group number 3, perspective number 3, they have the stance that climate change to them. And your students will answer from the perspective from which they were assigned. You can also have, from the stance which they were assigned. You could also have them adopt a certain perspective. So for example, in a psychology course, if you're talking about human development and cognitive development, you might assign this perspective 1. They are looking at it from a behaviorist perspective, a constructivist perspective, and maybe a sociocultural perspective. In education, you might debate the merit perspective of a student with a learning disability, another a teacher's perspective, and perhaps this one could be a state education agency official, such as a TEA, Texas Education Agency official. And so I've used the Pinwheel discussion in a graduate course that was face-to-face, and my students had adopted the perspective of a different author or authors that wrote journal research articles. And so I would pose questions to them and I would say, well, how would your researcher, how would the author answer and respond in that way? I've also used this with my undergraduate students to discuss controversial issues in art history. So for example, discussing the use of cultural artifacts, such as totem poles, and whether or not that should be used as art, and also whether or not those should be allowed to deteriorate, as in several Native American cultures, or if they should be preserved. Also, whether museums should return stolen cultural artifacts to the country of origin. So these topics, obviously, if they're controversial or ethical issues, can get a little bit heated at times. And so it's best when using this to kind of have parameters for your discussion and also remind your students of discussion etiquette. So you want to remind them that, for example, using the topic of climate change, using the Handmaid's Tale example, that just because a student or their peers are arguing from the role character of Aunt Lydia doesn't mean that those are their personal beliefs. So this will help to kind of hopefully mitigate things from becoming personal or personal attacks, etc. You also want to remind them to use respectful language, of course, and also how to respectfully disagree with a peer. So the Pinwheel discussion, before beginning, I would suggest that you give them, this is an outline for, and you want to share that with your students. So again, reviewing the parameters and etiquette, you can put your students into breakout rooms or breakout groups through Zoom or Blackboard Collaborate, give them some time to prepare. In the whole group, the provocateurs will ask question number 1. Again, you could give your students 5 minutes to prepare in their breakout rooms. They'll come back and debate. So the 3 groups will have each 5 minutes to debate, and then you can repeat based on time. So how could you do this for a synchronous online session? One way is through Zoom. So Zoom offers the breakout rooms. You would want to manually create these beforehand. Okay, I see the chat, but I'm going to wait and just kind of explain these and then come to the chat. For the breakout rooms, you can manually create them because, again, you want to inform your students of which text that they're supposed to read. So for like using the Handmaid's Tale as an example, you tell them which chapters or through which page numbers to read. You also want to inform them of which character that they're going to be responding from. That way they have that stance in mind. Or using the earth sciences example, you want to give them ample time to be able to research climate change from their particular stance. If it's enabled in your meeting settings, you can set the breakout rooms beforehand. What's nice about Zoom is that you as the instructor or the host can join each breakout room to make sure that your students are on task to answer any questions that they might have. You can also reopen the same breakout rooms throughout the session. So as I put in the previous outline, you can, that way you don't have to manually assign them each time. They can automatically go back to the original breakout rooms that they were in. And you can also set them breakout rooms to close after a specified time. So for example, you give them 5 minutes and they'll automatically close after 5 minutes. In this link, and again, you'll receive the slides with the links included. There's a video on how to create these breakout rooms, kind of question and answer there. And then Colt has Zoom resources. Somebody mentioned, I saw on the chat, Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, and yes, you can also use this with Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, create their breakout groups. You have the option to join. Again, each breakout group, you can set a timer. This is a collective timer for the breakout groups as well. And then you can supervise the chat. So as they're chatting with each other, it'll pop up where you can see what they're saying. So you might say like, yes, you're right on track, or no, or you might say like, that's remember to use respectful language or respectful examples, etc. So there are resources as well here, a video that you could watch, some explanations and instructions that Blackboard Collaborate has included also. I do want to jump to one page and then come back and look at the chat for any questions. So resources on the Pinwheel discussion. So there's a video of this in action. I think it was in a high school, a senior level class. There are detailed instructions on how you can use the Pinwheel discussion. And then also if you want to evaluate, there's a rubric, and these can be adapted for your purposes as well. As I mentioned, the CTE has a teaching continuity website, and the sessions, the link is here, will be to the recorded videos, such as for Kahoot or for Flipgrid. Colt, of course, has many resources. Also, they're also offering training sessions for summer courses, so to help you prepare for online and remote instruction for this summer.